You are listening to the Dare to Love podcast with your hosts, Sonica Tinker and Christian Peterson, founders of LoveWorks.
Thank you for joining me today. I'm looking very forward to being with you. Today I'm going to be talking about one of the most common questions I hear from single people who are dating and exploring relationship. How do I know if this is the one? It's one of the biggest questions people want to know as quickly as possible. So I'm going to share some of what I have come to discover about the development of relationship and how to best be with that question. I actually think more and more these days people are trying to decide whether they're getting married or divorced on the first date. There really is this idea or ideal that people have where I'm going to see somebody and I'm just going to know right away whether or not they are the one. I'm going to know whether or not this is my future husband or my future wife. And people are more and more expecting that in this dating process, when they meet someone, they're going to meet someone who is already a match to their vision of what it is they want to create in a long-term relationship. In other words, they're anticipating, expecting meeting somebody who is already going to feel like their beloved, their soulmate, their lifelong husband and or wife. Relationship actually takes time to build. While there might be an instantaneous connection with someone, relationship by itself takes time. And often in the dating process, people get impatient and they want to speed up that process. That actually is not speed upable from my own personal experience. I was working with a woman who has been dating someone for about 7 months, and she and her dating partner are both of them repeatedly finding themselves agonizing over that question. Is this the person I'm going to be with? Am I wasting my time? Should I be leaving this person? And again, there's this desire to know, is this the person I am to spend my life with? And what I'm about to share with you is what I shared with her about what is required for long-term relationship that may allow people who are in this dating process to make peace with the question and allow its unfolding in right time. There are many, many facets that are working to be able to create a long-term relationship, especially for those of us who are older and single and dating other people who are older and single, where we already have lives in place. So we have cultivated, perhaps a house and a community and a work situation. We might even have children that we feel tied to a place around. And so when we are dating someone else who is older, maybe somebody else who has children, maybe somebody else who has an ex in the mix, there is a lot that goes on in the background to take two individuals with two separate lives, to bring them together, to meld into a new configuration of family, to meld into a new partnership, a shared life together. So certainly one thing that is happening in the background is adjusting to this new possibility for relationship. When you find someone, you fall in love with them, and you think there's some possibility for being able to create a long-term relationship with that person. So one of the aspects that needs to happen is, one, allowing our future that we have been imagining in our minds to now include this person that we are currently in relationship with, that we're currently dating. So we have to kind of wrap our mind around including that particular person. And we also need to figure out how we're going to now meld these lives. So one thing that has to get aligned and melded is the physical aspects, right? How are we going to take these two separate houses and form another household? How are we going to meld our finances, our work situations? How are we going to meld our families and our children? Right? What kind of rightful roles and place do we fall into as step parents, perhaps, of these new children? How did the children, if we both have children from separate spouses, previous relationships, those children also need to be able to form some kind of new configuration that includes other children, other siblings, right? Expanding their family to include another parent figure in their lives. All of these things take time. They don't happen fast. In fact, when I think about sometimes my own personal experience, one of the things that I have been known to say many times is if it had happened any faster, I probably would have had a nervous breakdown, because there were, like, as I'm speaking about, right, there were so many different aspects that of our individual lives that needed to come into alignment to create this new possibility for a relationship. So in my own situation, as an example, some of you may know my previous partner was a woman with whom I had 2 children, and I had been for some 15 years identifying myself as a lesbian in a long-term relationship with a woman. And I had developed my work in life, working with relationships. I was a mother in my community with my children. I had amassed a good amount of savings. I owned several rentals with my then partner. And I was in a very different place in my life as well. I was living in California. I was 47 years old when I met Christian at a course on the East Coast. Christian, on the other hand, was 32 when I met him. He was living in Denmark with his brother and sister-in-law on a farm. He had no full-time work. He took on part-time gigs and traveled in between time. He had just decided he wasn't going to pursue the last little bit of his bachelor's degree and wasn't quite sure what he wanted to do with his life. He had embarked on a personal development program and quest to support himself, to get healthy, to be happy, and to create a relationship. He was hoping to find himself a partner around the same age who was also living at least on that side of the pond, who was ready to start a family. So needless to say, when Christian and I first fell in love, there were many, many aspects of our lives that needed to come into alignment before we could, with conviction, declare that we were committed to spending our lives together. And it actually took about 2.5 years for us to gradually, in the process of dating and being with each other, to co-align and co-create this new reality, which included a differing identity and a differing vision or version of our vision that then we had up until then cultivated. So when I first met Christian, right, we had a couple of weeks on the East Coast at this course. I came back there another 3 months later, and we spent another couple of weeks together. Another 3 months went by, and I went to Denmark and spent a couple of weeks. Another 3-4 months went by. Christian came out to California for a couple of weeks. And we kind of continued on with that pattern. Another 3 months went by and he came out for 3 weeks. Another couple of months went by. He came back for another 4 weeks. We just gradually, as we were in this dating process, spent more and more time together and less time apart, as our bodies and our emotions and the physical aspects of our lives could come into some new version or some new alignment that made it possible for us to want to marry, settle down, and live together, as it happened in California. So, for him at first, I remember the first time I asked him to come out and stay with me for 3 months in California, he was absolutely livid with me that I would even suggest he leave his hometown and his family for that long. And really what was behind his anger is he was not ready yet to entertain the possibility of being away from his family in Denmark for a 3-month period. He could imagine being away from his family for a 3-week period or a 4-week period. And so that is what we did, right? Is we did what we could imagine for now.
You are listening to the Dare to Love podcast with your hosts, Sonica Tinker and Christian Peterson, founders of LoveWorks.
Meanwhile, I'm readjusting from thinking of myself as a lesbian to thinking of myself as a straight person, which had a big whole bunch of process with it. I'm also adjusting to this new possibility, which was huge, of being with my children half-time, not living with them full-time as I had up until that point, which was another huge adjustment. I had to deal with the adjustment of now being financially, dependent on myself for generating income, because I was about to lose my, previous partner with whom I had joint financial ventures, and I was about to partner with a man who had absolutely no financial, backing or savings to bring to our relationship, as well as no livelihood. Adjusting to our children now having a man in their life that was an adult figure about to become a parental figure. And, we also had to accommodate and adjust to this whole shift and change of being with somebody with a 15-year age difference. At some point, it became more and more painful for us to be apart and more delightful to be together, until at some point about 2 years in, Christian decided that he wanted to live here and wanted to get married and wanted to claim, my children as his children. And that whole process took time for both of us to adjust our lives, our expectations, our relationship, our emotions, so that we were lined up with this new life that we were about to embark on. And it took a process, it took a ton of transition and change for us to be able to meet each other there. That is happening in the background of every relationship. Not to mention also another piece that I want to bring out here, which is a huge one, is also when we're new in relationship, we're bumping up against each other's differences. We're triggering each other's woundedness. And the other thing that is also happening in the background of the dating process, in addition to all of these pieces coming into alignment more and more, is we are learning how to navigate differences, how to resolve conflicts, how to work through challenges, how to deal with breakdowns and problems, how to deal with differences of opinion, differing desires, different lifestyle preferences. So also in the process of this dating experience or the beginning of relationship, we're learning whether or not we can trust ourselves and each other to stay in there to work through challenging issues, which is an important bunch of data to be able to collect for being able to groundedly declare, I want to live with you forever. We have been through enough these last couple of years. I've been able to watch how we deal with all of these breakdowns as they arise, and I really can now ground it, with some grounded experience, be able to say, I want to spend my life with you. I'm really clear that we can create a really great life together, given what we've been through, what we've co-created up until this point, and who we are and who we've become. At some point in our process of dating and building our relationship more and more over this 2.5 year period, the question of whether or not I was the one for him or he was the one for me, right? Even though we might have had inklings here and there of yes, and also inklings, I'll be honest, of no, there's no way, what in the heck are we thinking? The answer of you're the one came from living. It came from being repeatedly and recurrently in relationship, having multiple conversations, having multiple experiences, right? Working through new things, navigating challenging emotional pain and loss, and working through our disappointment when expectations weren't met, navigating the unexpected, what should I say, that the unexpected dramatic difference of who we actually ended up with and who we were imagining being with. That was a lot to contend with, both in ourselves and with each other, and being able to hold all of that pain and that excitement and that joy and that transition and even moving together, right? There was a lot to be able to work with. And it was in the process of this recurrent lining up more and more and more with our desire to be with each other and build a life with each other that required all of these differing aspects of our individual lives readjusting and lining themselves up more and more with this new relationship vision that we were cultivating. It was in that process that the answer of "Are you the one?" came to be known. And if we had tried to rush that quicker, if I had at some point delivered an ultimatum and said, you need to declare whether or not I'm the one. And if he did the same thing, if he said, hey, look, I'm either it, and you have to forsake everybody else, and you have to say that you're going to absolutely build a life with me. If he had said that earlier on, we might not be together, because the answer to that question came when it came, and it wasn't rushable. If we had hurried it up or tried to hurry it up, I am suspecting we would have pushed each other away. What that required, and for us, and I believe it's what is required for any new budding relationship, is we had to let the question sit there of whether or not we were going to be together, whether or not this was the one, whether or not we were going to end up being partnered, and in our case, married. We had to let the question sit there unanswered, trusting that it would answer itself in time. And our attention needed to keep being drawn back only to, how did we feel right now? Were we inspired to be with each other now? Were we inspired to have another visit? Were we inspired to have another conversation? Were we inspired to stay in there and work through this particular issue, this particular problem? Did we keep coming back, right? All we needed to do was to answer the question, am I wanting to be here right now? What would it take for me to feel good about my relationship with Christian right now? What can I do right now to create the best feeling experience possible? It was by asking those kinds of questions that brought me back to the moment where there was a love feeling, where there was always something I could do to have myself feel better, to have our relationship feel as good as possible, to feel as empowering as possible. There was always something I could do, even if I didn't know the answer to that question. And I find that is a very powerful place to stand in, that allows relationship to organically build and grow. That cannot happen if we try to answer that question too soon. I was working with a woman recently, and I asked her in the face of this question, right? Should I stay? Should I go? Is he the one? Is he not the one? And I remember asking her, I said, well, if I or anyone else said, he's not the one, you should go now, would you? And she said, no, absolutely not. I'm not ready to end this relationship. And I said, well, conversely, if I said, he's absolutely the one, and he's the person you're going to spend your whole life with, would you marry him today or tomorrow? And she said, absolutely not. I'm not ready to get married to him. And I said, precisely. That what that tells you is, if you're not ready to end the relationship and you're also not ready to get married, right, or commit to a lifetime with this person, it means you are somewhere in that process of exploring relationship. And just like you can't force yourself to stay or go, one of the things I always say is that if you don't know whether or not this is your relationship is done or not, right, as long as that's a question, you can assume you're not done. And use your relationship with this person that you're not ready to end the relationship of, right? Use that relationship to cultivate your ability to be the best partner possible, for you to produce and create the best feeling experience possible, for you to use that relationship to practice navigating through complex emotional situations. You use that relationship to practice working through conflicts. You use that relationship to practice dealing with differences of opinion, for dealing with disappointment and unmet expectations. You use that relationship to deepen your capacity for creating great relationship. And one of two things is going to happen as you do that. You're going to keep growing yourself. Your relationship is going to keep growing. And at some point in that process, it's going to be very clear to you, wow, you're it. I want to commit to you for the rest of my life. Or, this really isn't working for me. I would like to create something else. And you can feel good about, even if it ends at some point by your choice or theirs, right? Because there just is some piece that isn't quite aligning up for whatever reason. You can feel good about the fact that you used that time well to practice being as great a partner in relationship as possible, to grow yourself as much as possible, that you can now bring that improved self to your next relationship experience. So you really don't have to worry about wasting time, right? You can absolutely create for yourself a good experience with whoever you're with. Trust that it will end up wherever it is best meant to end up, and use your relationship as long as possible, as long as you're not willing to go, right? Or not willing to marry, not willing to commit, is just allow yourself to grow as much as possible throughout that experience. Trust that in that process of working through things together and slowly adjusting to this new reality, allowing you and your partner and potential children and families and exes to slowly blend and remorph into a new configuration, right? Allowing that process that absolutely takes time, that that as you do that more and more, and you keep allowing that relationship process to organically develop, at some point, if you do decide, right, to merge your lives, it's going to organically come from that process of slow adjustment and adaptation as you merge from two individual lives to now a joint life. So I'll say a couple of more things here about what you can focus in on, because it can be really scary to be, investing a whole bunch of your life and yourself and your family into this relationship that you are unsure about the future of. It can be really scary to love someone full out without there being a commitment in place, anything certain that you can count on moving forward. So there's a couple of things you can do. One, make sure you nourish yourself outside of the relationship as well as in the relationship. Don't have, I'll say it this way, don't have your partner be your only fueling station. You want to make sure you get filled up outside of the relationship so that you stay as centered and whole as possible, and you're bringing this full, great, wonderful being to the relationship, and you don't shift yourself out of feeling empowered, loved, whole into, a needy person who is dependent on this other person for all of your needs and for your happiness. So that's one thing you can absolutely do, is focus in on making sure you're nourished other places outside of the relationship, so that in the event you encounter breakdowns, you still have support. In the event your relationship ends, you still have support. You still have structures in your life that are supportive. The other thing you can do, which has been really powerful for a lot of people who are new in relationship, is to find something you can commit to. I can commit to being totally honest with you. I can commit to not dating other people while we're exploring this process, right? I can commit to being monogamous with you. I can commit to not breaking up with you when we're in the middle of a fight. I can commit to that if we do break up, we do so consciously and with love, right? You can set up certain parameters that create as much as possible a feeling of safety as you're in this process of exploration. So even though you're not quote unquote married, or you don't have a lifelong commitment, and you haven't said, oh my God, you're it, I want to be with you forever, you still have something you can center yourself around and keep bringing yourself back to that produces a similar experience inside of yourself that a commitment might. So you find something you can both commit to inside of the relationship that provides as much peace as possible. And the last thing I'll say too is, remember, in this process, it's natural to have questions about whether or not you want to be with this person, and the other person is going to have questions about you. It's really important to realize that questions are a natural part of this relationship building process. And just because the person you're dating has a question about whether or not they want to move to California from Denmark, for example, doesn't necessarily mean that they don't love you, that they don't want you, or that they aren't going to want to even do that. All it means is that they are in the process of exploring and adjusting and shifting and changing and trying to figure out where they are in relationship to this question of commitment for the long term or not. And it's not necessarily a statement at all, a personal statement about you and a declaration that somehow you aren't enough, that if you were, they would just already know the answer to that question. To really allow the question to be there and to know that it is a healthy part of the beginning of relationship. In fact, I remember hearing that dating and the whole purpose of dating is, and I'll offer this to you now, is really to answer the question, are you the person I would like to mate with, right? Are you the person I would like to spend the rest of my life with? Are you the person I would like to join with? And that question, as I've just spoken about here for this last half hour, it takes time to answer. And it is a healthy part of this process as we are weaving together these two lives into one, and sometimes multiple lives. As I said, if we have children or grandchildren, extended family, it really is this whole process of merging together multiple aspects of our lives, merging finances and careers and work and physical locations and homes and all of that. So to trust that the questioning process is really embodying all of these aspects that are in process of coming to alignment. And you can trust that the answer to that question, are you the one, is in the future. And your job is to live as best as you can in this moment, being the best partner you can be in this moment, and trust that by taking the necessary steps now and now and now and now again, that question will in fact be answered. And when you know, you will know without question. Blessings on your journey.
You have been listening to the Dare to Love podcast with Sonica Tinker and Christian Peterson, co-founders of LoveWorks. And hey, if you found this podcast to be valuable, would you hit the share button and go ahead and share this with your friends on Facebook, Twitter, or wherever your favorite hangouts are. Thanks so much for sharing the love.